Wait, we're gonna have to watch it again now?
Yes, every single moment. We'll do a play-by-play. And now Ed is picking his nose. And here we see the Winry in her natural habitat, crying hysterically while also holding a gun. It sounds like my Tuesdays.
Really?
Yes.
Does that
So,
happen to you every Tuesday?
on July
July.
is my favorite band name. So, Scooby-Dooby-Doo.
Where art thou?
Thou hast shirked thine responsibilities to the guild. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where art thou? Thine works shall send thee to heaven. Okay, welcome to Brotherhood, a spoiler-filled podcast where we review each episode of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. My name is Dylan MacArthur, the older brother.
And my name is Timothy MacArthur, the taller brother.
Today's episode, Backs in the Distance.
Or the surprisingly true story of the Arizona Diamondbacks and their surprise trip to Mars.
Surprise, it's not a true story.
Oh.
So
anyway.
So how does this episode begin? Okay, so this episode begins for the first time, I think, ever in this show's history, with a flashback where we get to see what all is going on, because this is actually a part of a multi-episode arc, which gets more frequent as this show goes on. And I kind of want to comment on this because one of the things that really stuck out to me when I first started watching this show, starting with episode 1, was how tight the storytelling was. They didn't waste any time. Well, they did waste a little bit of time at Cornell. That episode could have been completely cut, and we all would have been fine. But for the most part, they didn't waste time on adding episodes just to draw out an arc, just to fill up airtime, which is, refreshingly rare in anime. Usually you end up getting, 8 different episodes where it's like, let's go through the 8 different levels of this building, which is a reference that you won't get. But that was this is something that I don't particularly enjoy in anime, is the long, drawn out, why say in 2 episodes what you could say in 10, and it gets more frequent as the show goes on. But here it is acceptable, because at this point we've been going, and it feels like we haven't really had a nice moment of overall dramatic clarity and resolution. And what's going to happen over the next, about 10 episodes or so, is we're going to see a lot of questions that have been posed over the prior 21 episodes start to find answers and start to find resolution.
I'm sorry, but when you said pose, I got this picture in my head of one of the characters voguing or something.
Well, that's your fault.
I just thought that would be...
But in a season that is ostensibly 64 episodes, the size of, more than the size of 3 long series arcs, you can't go all the way through that without at least stopping to take a breath and be like, hey, okay, I know you're dying to know this, and this, so I'm going to give you a little bit of information to tide you over for the next 20 episodes. And this is where we start to get that. It is done better here than it is later on in the series. And that's all I'm going to say about that. We'll get to that. So, after the recap, we begin right where we left off with Lanfan getting her face chopped off by Wrath. But she doesn't get it chopped off. She just gets her mask chopped off, which is a shame because it's probably really expensive. But anyway, we get a little surprise where, this is
and the
classic
face
setup.
Isn't expensive? I mean, how would a face trying to fix someone's face after it gets cut into not be expensive?
I mean, she's from Xing. This is something they can. Never mind. Well, I have an answer for that, but now I get to
Oh,
experience the joy that you usually have and be like, I don't know that I can say that at this point in the show.
but here's the other thing. They're also in a mistress at the moment, so it's going to be expensive, unless, of course, they go all the way back to Xing, which will also be expensive because of the long journey. So yeah, either way, it's going to be expensive.
My point is, Timothy, that at this point, the mask has more character development than she does. I am more heavily invested in the art design than I am in anything to do with Lan Fan. So,
True.
let's keep things in perspective. We have a classic TV payoff, which is that our last episode ended with this big cliffhanger of, oh no, is she going to survive? And it more or less begins with the joke of his sword has been cut in half, and she's like, haha, I got you. You thought I was going to be killed in the last episode, but nope. I can still do stuff. I don't have any character development whatsoever, but at least I can
And
chop
she's
stuff in
going to
half.
basically be a she's basically going to be a sack of potatoes that can throw flash grenades throughout the rest of the episode.
Wrath gives Gluttony permission to eat her, which Ling ain't having any of that.
Yeah, Ling finally gets to kick butt in this episode. Well, more specifically, he slices.
Head, but
Yeah, he slices the face off of Gluttony, and also the hands off of Gluttony. But
unlike Lan Fan,
yeah.
who has the character excitement of Sawdust, Ling actually gets interesting in this episode. I love the line.
Yes, he's more than being annoying. He's actually pretty intense in this episode.
I wouldn't say more than being annoying. I would say that the days of Ling being this annoying brat who doesn't do anything helpful to the story at all are now, thankfully, behind us.
Done for.
I love the line which comes up next when he's cornered in this room by Wrath and Gluttony, and he in order to explain why he continues to take care of Lan Fan, he says, "You should know, being a king of this land, that a king's responsibility is to his people. So, that's what a king does, is he takes care of people, even if it puts himself in danger." The subtext, of course, being, this is Ling's subtle statement of, I am a king. I may not be the emperor yet, but I am, in blood and in character, a king, and I am willing to act that way. Which is a really cool statement from him. We're finally getting to see what matters to him. Beyond just, I want immortality. Good for you. Nobody cares. Other note that I have about this part is that here's why the camera work during these couple scenes between the homunculi and the Shingi's peeps.
Shingi's peeps.
This is why I like.
That was kind of a funny way of putting it.
I mean, there are many reasons why I was never able to get into the original Full Metal Alchemist series, and why I happen to really enjoy this one. But I think first and foremost, the biggest reason why is the storyboarding. There's so much creativity and dynamism in the way that these shots are framed and in the way that the action is composed that makes this not only an exciting sequence to go through, but
interesting?
But yeah, also an intriguing experience. The fact that we never, the fact that this show has made it a part of its visual vocabulary that it's not particularly unusual to use a flash to white in place of a shot of somebody cutting through something. But what is particularly creative about the way that this show uses that is what they choose to put surrounding it. Such as many episodes ago, you'll remember in the underground Chimera layer episode where we had the first instance of eye versus eye. We zoomed into Boa's eye, and then we got two slashes that were a little bit of a fade to white that symbolized the decimation of that character.
And this time we got a similar shot, but with what's his name, Gluttony having his face chopped into.
The key to this is what comes before is so dynamic that when the camera actively chooses not to show you what happened, but rather to cut to white, it feels less like, oh, let us spare you of the emotional hurt of seeing somebody get cut in half because that would be so damaging, because anime never does that. If anime can indulge itself, it will. That is the number one rule of anime. Instead, it comes across as a somewhat metaphysical experience where we're being like, oh, where it's subtly
Into the white light or something?
Yeah, it subtly calls forth those ideas exactly of into the white light, of this character being pushed to the other side. Of course, Gluttony isn't going to be pushed to the other side that easily because he is a homunculus. He's just going to recover. That's what he does. But because of the way that those shots are composed, that they are so dynamic, and leading in the cut to white is so incredibly exciting, and I guess the word that keeps coming to mind is dynamic.
Yep.
It creates for a more enriching experience. And nobody watching that shot is going to think, oh, they're subtly hearkening back to me the idea of the white light, the heavens in the distance, and the fact that they are now calling to this character. Nobody's going to think that when they're watching that shot.
No one's going to think that, at least not consciously.
But the subtle insinuations of such make for a more enriching and engrossing experience of the scene.
I mean, they might think it consciously after they've watched it a few times, like we have, but they won't just all of a sudden go, oh yeah, that's what that means. That's what they're trying to do. I see there.
Next, we get to see Winry flashing back to when her parents left for the war. Winry is such a great character.
Yes, she is.
Even as a 4-year-old, there's not a moment when she's on screen that I don't believe, yeah, she's a real person.
She's a human. I also liked how they made the smiles on the parents look fake when they were talking to Winry.
As if they were talking down to her.
I don't know. I don't think it's as if they were talking down to her. I don't think that's what they were going for, and that's not how it felt to me.
I mean, they weren't being condescending, but nevertheless, those were the faces of parents who are trying to convince their child that, yeah, everything's going to be fine. We'll be back before you know it. But of course, they're lying, and we know that they're lying because we live in the future.
Yeah, we live in the future. It's a flashback. What are you gonna do?
And in the land of the present, she is apparently going with the Hughes family to visit the grave of Maze Hughes, where she introduces this idea into the text of the episode, which is that she keeps seeing the backs of her parents in other people, and she's starting to wonder, why do I keep making these associations, and are these even good for me? There's a line during this scene where Grace Hughes asks her to come visit Maze Hughes' grave more often because he gets lonely. Of course, the subtext being, and I love this subtext, I'm lonely, please visit me more often. Because I have no one to talk to.
Yeah.
We laugh, but this is an actual problem when you are a single mom. It's like, what do I do?
Part of me wants, I kind of laugh, but it's more of the way it was said by you that makes me laugh. If you would have said it in a different manner, maybe I wouldn't have laughed.
If I'd said it less thirstily.
Yeah. Less thirstily? Is that even a word?
Grace Hughes is a thirsty rando. So.
What?
You've never heard that expression?
No.
No.
What's a rando?
Okay, well, rando is the easiest to explain. Rando just means random, like a random person. A rando is somebody who, is a random person. A thirsty rando is a little bit harder for me to explain.
Well, I think I get what it means. It it means a person who's... Does it mean like a weird person who wants attention? Or whatever?
Basically, but more, not just wants attention, but is desperate for it.
Okay. She didn't seem desperate necessarily.
No,
I mean, she looked
no,
like she...
I was joking, Timothy. Grace Hughes is not actually a thirsty rando. She's just a normal single mother who all she has for company is her child, which, as much as she loves her child, and as much as I'm sure she enjoys the company of her 3-year-old daughter, a 3-year-old daughter is not the same as a fully grown adult who can discuss politics and also help brew tea when you're tired at night. So,
Which is true, I'm sure.
Winry takes a little stroll down the street and she discovers, because apparently she couldn't put this together on her own from the events of the previous episode, but she discovers that Ed and Al are battling this crazy dangerous alchemist dude who kills alchemists, and then she has another flashback of being like, oh, now I'm seeing my parents back in this guy that I kind of like. This is a thing that we tragically overlooked in the previous episode. She now loves Al. This is the thing that
Al?
Yeah. Surprise! We all thought she was falling in love with Ed, but you were wrong. No. This is something that I think we glossed over a little bit in our previous review, which is that Winry now has the hots for Ed because reasons. We don't really get any justification for why we should believe that she falls in love with Ed until, I would say, much later on, possibly, hint, hint, wink, wink, the last episode. But after visiting Maze Hughes' grave, Winry goes for a stroll through the city and starts overhearing people talking about, have you heard? Al and Ed are battling this dangerous alchemist.
Have you heard there's a rumor in the mistress? Have you heard what they're saying on the streets?
Scar kills people you like. And she has this terrible flashback of her parents walking away and suddenly her dad morphs into Ed, which is a kind of weird thing to think about from a Freudian standpoint, but we're gonna move along and just pretend that never happened.
And the comparison between Ed and Al leaving to the departure of Winry's parents was, in my opinion, a nice touch, especially since both parties were leaving for a form of battle.
Oh, hey, I hadn't noticed that. That's interesting. We might have to come back to that later on this episode. What I love about this, because everything that has happened so far has taken up, about 7 minutes, 5.5 if you discount the opening credits, which you should because they take forever.
Forever. And ever.
But what I love about this opener is that really there's only one thing that we really care about, which is, of course, Ed and Al, and how are they going to defeat Scar. We kind of care about Ling because he's starting to get more character development. We certainly don't care about Lon Fawn. And Winry, of course, we were not expecting to be in this episode at all, because what does she have to do with fighting Scar? I don't know. She's an automail mechanic. She'll eventually have something. But what I love is that rather than jumping straight into the battle between Ed and Scar, instead, we begin with a couple slow scenes, all of which help to explain or help to illustrate to us how Ed's survival in this battle is important to another character. And it isn't a moment sooner that we cut back to it. We could have drawn out Winry's journey throughout the entire episode, because certainly there's room. It's not like this is an episode overflowing with events. It's a fairly relaxed, loosely paced episode. But because they focus for the first few minutes on Winry and the relationships that she has lost and the few relationships that she has left, then it adds meaning and context to the battle that we wouldn't have otherwise had, and it allows us to stay there longer because we know why we care.
Yep.
During the scene, we get to see some cool alchemy, including a demonstration of how Al, I think, might be slightly better than Ed, actually, in terms of just raw talent. He's not as
Detailed?
he's not as adventurous as Ed is, but he
Yeah.
certainly seems to show a bit more power, as he does when he creates this giant hand to save Ed. And there was a thought that ran through my mind, which is, boy, I don't think that Ed could do that.
Ed has better ability, in my opinion, in terms of making details to his alchemic creations, like little details. But Al definitely has more ability in terms of making.
I don't know if that's talent so much as it is just a reflection of their personalities.
Okay.
Because Ed is the one who would make something that he thinks is cool, whereas Al is the one who would make something that,
Make something who he thinks would work.
yeah, just, I need to save my brother, so here we go. Even though maybe a hand isn't the most efficient way of saving somebody. You probably could have done a much simpler job just by, here's a block. But whatever, it's more visually interesting to look at a giant stone hand than it is just a boring old slab.
Also, it may also say like, "Hey, I'm reaching out to catch my brother from his fall."
The next few scenes or so can more or less be described as fight, 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 fight. Oh, snap, we ran out of budget. Okay, have everybody stand perfectly still.
And in that moment where they have everyone stand perfectly still,
which I might point out is barely even a third of the episode through.
that point where they have everyone standing still, they start talking about that one thing that happened quite a few episodes back where Nina was killed and Tucker was killed. And in this episode, you get to see a flashback to Shao Tucker's face. And my thought process is, dang it, I was really hoping to never see his face ever again. Because he's creepy.
But of course, this is relevant to the conversation because in this instance, we have protagonists and antagonists, both who consider what the other is doing to be the work of evil, work that must be stopped at all costs. Scar looks at what the Emestrians are doing with alchemy, and all that he sees is horror and terror. And yet he can't see how that same rule applies to the killing of two innocent boys who wouldn't have even really been capable of being in the military at the time of the war. They have absolutely nothing to do with the war. Ed and Al both consider what Scar is doing to be horrific because he is targeting largely innocent people, just because they do alchemy. And they're like, how is this any different from targeting from the Emestrians targeting the Ishvalans? Like, you crazy person, you're doing this terrible thing. And even as you said, Nina and Alexander, what in the world did they do wrong? Why did you have to kill them? You didn't, of course, because you're just a monster. This is the breaking down of, well, it's not quite the breaking down, but this is the beginning of the breaking down of their own false conceptions of each other, where they both see the other as pure monsters.
Because then Scar says, look, if I didn't do that, Nina and Alexander would have been part of horrendous experiments.
To which, of course, Ed and Al have nothing really to say.
Yeah, he's more than likely right, is what they're thinking. And I'm like, yeah, he is probably more than likely right.
What I love about that is that all of the adults in their life now, including the ones that are trying to kill them, are telling them that there is only one appropriate way to deal with the horrors of alchemy. And that apparently is to kill things. I mean, to put it bluntly, like, that's what Roy Mustang has said. That's what Riza, I believe, has said at this point. That's what Scar is saying at this point. Like, if it's terrible, you should destroy it. And, of course, Ed and Al represent this childish, like, it's perfect that they are children in this show because it is to the adults a fairly naive viewpoint that maybe, no, we shouldn't destroy things that are terrible. We should just give them a chance. this is a defining thing for them as characters, but it is also a defining thing for the theme of this show, which is, of course, what is the value of a human life? And for Ed and Al, it is priceless.
Unbeknownst to Ed and Al, Winry shows up, and then Edward's like, "Oh, by the way, Scar, you killed Winry's parents."
It's a classic sitcom gag. Classic. You can practically hear the audience in the background going, "Oh, they didn't know that she was showing up. Oh, it's so funny."
And then Winry grabs a gun after collapsing to the ground and saying, "You monster, you
It's a
killed
magic
my
gun
parents."
because it wasn't there before. Like, she collapses, and what? A convenient gun right next to her.
No. You see, there were guards that she had to pass who were collapsed.
True, but there weren't any guards collapsed next. Like, you can buy the fact that there would be a gun nearby, but that doesn't change the fact that it's a rather convenient demonstration gun.
The convenient demonstration gun. The successor to the convenient demonstration hammer.
There are so many convenient demonstration things in this world that gotta call them out when they appear.
Convenient demonstrations, gotta call them out.
Winry, of course, after learning that Scar killed her parents, is like, "Yeah, I'm going to be creepy now," and picks up the gun, and we have this lovely Dutch angle in which her eyes are practically the size of her head. She's just like, "I'm gonna be the MacGuffin for the rest of the episode, and you're just gonna have to spend the next 15 minutes wondering whether I'm going to shoot or not, because it's time for another flashback to the land of Ishval, where we get to learn where this weird tattoo thing of Scar's came from. Turns out I was wrong."
But your misconception was completely understandable. This is the show of Full Metal Alchemist we have here, so in a way, it's understandable that you would make the assumptions that you did.
In retrospect, they were laying on pretty thick that there was some connection between Scar's brother and the tattoos on his arm. I never would have guessed that that was because it was his brother's arm, although maybe I should have, knowing what I do about the principles of equivalent exchange in this world.
Yep.
His brother has been doing research on alchemy and alkahestry, and he's like, "This alchemy in this land is pretty weird." And we're like, okay, this is the second person to say that. I wonder where this is going. Side note, Dylan from the past did not wonder where this was going. He was just like, "Oh, we've got another creepy-looking brother dude. I wonder where this story is going." I had no idea. No idea. I just thought that Scar's brother was a weird rando that showed up just to give Scar a dramatic backstory. No idea. No idea what was coming.
No idea he was gonna give his arm?
In order to do this right, Timothy, we have to talk. We're just going to have to pass the microphone over to Dylan from the past so that he can explain all of his thoughts about this.
Sound effect time!
Whoa, Dylan from the past here. It's been a long time since I've been on this show. I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm not quite sure why we had to spend half of this episode on Scar's flashback. I mean, it's cool. Like, I finally get to know why one of my favorite villains is so messed up in the head, because he had this creepy brother dude who I don't really like, who is creepy and is doing weird stuff with alchemy. Like, I kind of expect a half dog girl to start crawling out of his room at any point in this episode.
I don't think he looked that creepy.
Oh,
Joe Tucker was definitely creepier.
I think it was the fact that he was wearing glasses. Like, unless you're short in this show, glasses, this is bad news. Don't trust people with glasses.
Okay.
That includes Maze Hughes. People, come at me.
Well,
I really like how it's... I kind of like how it's black and white throughout this whole thing, except for the two colors of blue And red, side note from Dylan from the future here, the fact that they don't include red eyes, but they do include blue eyes is significant because the Ishvalans don't really directly relate to the theme of the value of the human life. So we don't get to see their eyes as red here because that would confuse the metaphor. But we do get to see red later on in this episode as it relates to blood because obvious reasons. Back to Dylan from the past. Okay, so I thought it was really weird that the Emestrians had blue eyes. Like, okay. I thought it was weird that the people were like, we can use your brother as a weapon. And Scar was like, don't use my brother as a weapon because that would be weird. And then the people show up and they start shooting. And I'm like, oh, these poor Ishvalans. This is really hard to watch as a white guy who has seen many World War II videos.
Yeah.
And then we see another shot of this weird, like, that weird guy who is in the prison next to the 5th laboratory, who has the moon.
Kim Possible,
Yes, Kim Possible. We see Kim Possible, and he's... it's kind of interesting that we don't get to see his face. Presumably he's going to be a pretty important bad guy in the future. But it does this really powerful alchemy, which I guess isn't that particularly impressive. Like, the people just stand around. Like, there's glowing lights all around them. He's basically just putting on a fireworks show for them, and they're like, oh, don't put on this fireworks show.
But it's a fireworks show that's going to kill them. Why don't they
5 hours later... Timothy from the future, I don't think you understand how long they stand perfectly still, except for the brother who has plenty of time to run in front of his brother and be like, there are lights surrounding us, but surely if I stand between my brother and the person who's causing it, he'll be perfectly safe, which of course he will, because it's going to take 5 hours for that to do anything.
I think the alchemy does something that causes them to black out, or at least knock them out, or something.
That would be a useful thing to explain, but this show doesn't explain that.
Or maybe it causes concussive force to, like, just spew out of the ground. I don't know.
Maybe it has the power to cause a dramatic fade to white. There's lots of possibilities. And then Scar's brother is wandering around and he sees his brother and he's like, oh no, my brother is losing blood and he doesn't have an arm, so I'm gonna fuse my arm to him and then I'm gonna die. Because I am completely pointless in this episode, and I do absolutely nothing.
And apparently he does it in that same voice that sounds kind of like he's trying to sing, I guess, is what you were trying to go for.
As much as I actually genuinely enjoy this sequence, I don't see why it's that important that we get to know Scar's brother. Like,
yeah, we don't get to know anything about him.
He doesn't really do anything. He just sort of dies, and it's like, okay, why did I need to know him? We don't really see anything about the relationship between them. Scar just shows up once, and is like, hey, and then Scar's brother is like, hey, and then Scar's brother is dead. That's all we see of him. And he was studying alchemy, but that's over with. We're never going to see that again. Whatever. Sure, he studied alchemy and then he died. That's a powerful backstory, I guess.
Not really.
And anyway, Scar wakes up in a hospital or some sort of makeshift hospital, and the Rockbell peeps are like, oh, he's waking up, and don't do anything because you're losing a lot of blood. And, oh, what are you doing with that stabby thing? Why would you stab us? Okay, this is, now we're dead.
No. At first, he wakes up and he starts looking angry, and then the Rockbells are like, I think they say something along the lines of, where's the anesthetic? And then one of them's like, oh, we're conveniently out.
We're not anesthetic, it's sedative. We're all out of sedative because we used it all on the last guy, which, by the way, fun fact for all the rest of the people in that hospital, they are in pain. This is the point at which the blue eyes got old for me. I was like, I'm good, thanks. I no longer need to see any more shots of people with weird glowing blue eyes. Oh, and we get to see the old lady and her son from a few episodes ago who miraculously don't age at all over the next few years.
maybe the secret to making a philosopher's stone without having to infuse it with human lives is simply traumatize people. They'll be able to live forever.
Apparently.
Hmm.
And then Scar goes and he sees what happened to this town where he grew up, and it is decimated, and he's very sad. And then we cut back to the rest of the episode, and I'm honestly not quite sure why I had to see all of this. I mean, it's cool.
Yeah,
I like it.
what were they doing? What were they, as an ad Alan Winry, even doing during Scar's flashback? Were they having a really tense tea party?
That's my headcanon. While Scar is dozing off into space, they just start sipping tea, and they're like, I wonder when he's going to come back from his flashback. More sugar. Meanwhile, Winry is still shaking with the gun pointed at Scar, going like, I don't want any sugar, no thanks. More of a coffee gal myself.
That is so funny. Okay.
And that's all that Dylan from the past really has to say. So, goodbye, everybody. Okay, so Dylan from the future is back with a few more comments to say about that whole section. So Dylan from the past was not that impressed with the blue eyes. I am much more impressed now that I have given it some more thought and been like, okay, yeah, the fact that we have a clear example of red versus blue in this instance, these two diametrically opposed colors in, the most different that they could possibly be in a full-on confrontation. It's a little... They weaken the metaphor a little bit by having Kim Lee show up. Sorry, who's Kim Lee? I don't know. Kim Possible. Kim Possible shows up, does lots of weird red glowing things, and, that obscures the metaphor a little bit, but it's a really interesting visual motif that we get to see. It doesn't appear anywhere else in the episode, or it doesn't appear anywhere else in the show. And I'm a little bit disappointed by that, but it is cool in this instance. Other thing that I wanted to point out that Dylan from the past forgot to mention is just a lovely little line where Scar's brother, where they're all together before they about to be exploded, and Scar's brother mentions that his legs are shaking and he's just not ready for this whole war thing. And the thing that I wanted to point out right here is, actually, no, that's exactly what happens when you get an adrenaline rush, is you steadily lose your ability to fully control your limbs. And good on this show for, taking the time to be fairly realistic. As always, one of the best parts of this show is just how much research Arakawa put into this story and all of the elements surrounding it, and it shows.
Yep.
Anything else that you have to say about what happens during this flashback sequence?
Not really. Not that hasn't already been said. At least not, I think.
And then we return back to the world of the present. The Elric brothers put away their teacups. Winry is still standing shakily with the gun pointed at Scar, and he's like, you should shoot me, but if you do, then I will consider you my enemy. To which I'm like, yes, I love these three-way conflict, yes!
And then Scar gets impatient and is like, screw this, and then just leaps at Edward.
It's not that he goes for Edward, it's that he goes directly for Winry, which is a bit intense, but then Edward just happens to slide in front, and we get this nice parallelism, which even Scar recognizes is a bit convenient. And he's like, okay, maybe I shouldn't deal with you kids anymore because you're making me flashback and you're making me feel things, and I don't like it, so peace. He goes on his own little journey. Al goes after him. Winry is confused because she can't figure out why she couldn't pull the trigger. And there's a moment where she thinks it might be just because, maybe it's because I don't love people enough. Maybe it's because I'm just weak and I can't do anything. And Ed comes in and he's like, no, no, that's not why. That's not why you weren't able to pull the trigger. The reason you weren't able to pull the trigger is because yours are the hands that create and sustain life. And that's important. There's something about that scene that kind of doesn't, it's not quite working as well as it should. I'm not quite sure what it is about it.
Part of it is, I think, the soundtrack, not necessarily the music. The music, I think, works with it fine. I think at some point, I think they should have allowed a little bit of Winry's crying to be heard, but not all of it.
Oh, I disagree. I think it was absolutely important that we get to see her in hysterics so that we can understand.
I mean, seeing her in hysterics for me was okay, but hearing it,
I think we needed that. It's awkward, it's uncomfortable, yes, but it's necessary because we need to see the impact that being a potential killer has on her and just how much she truly is not meant for this life.
Then maybe the problem was that they had the end music happening too soon.
Again, I disagree because I think that was important to release the tension of the scene. I think the problem for me is the fact that because, like, Al, the fact that he never once says that my hand and neither are my hands makes that conversation feel slightly chauvinistic. It feels a little bit like, oh, you're a woman, and therefore you aren't a killing person, which just that's a little bit weird. I realize that that's not what they were trying to do, and in the context of the show, you can realize that that's not what they're trying to say, but it does come across that way subliminally.
And besides, they have plenty of characters that are kick butt. Like Riza, for example. She's really freaking awesome and can fight. And she's a she.
She's a she, and she's not opposed to taking human life. And that doesn't make her any less of a woman. But there is an aspect of that conversation that does come across a little bit, oh, women aren't for killing, that's a man's job. Which I know that's not what they were trying to go for, but that does kind of come across. Yeah, that takes us to the end of the episode. Final thoughts.
I'm tired, holy crap.
I think that's just because you spent about 5 minutes explaining something that you and I both know is going to be cut. And I think you figured out halfway through that this is probably going to be cut from the final episode, but you just kept going.
Yeah, because I'm a rambler. Rambler. I liked this episode. It was pretty intense. There were some things that were added that maybe they could have done better with. But that's basically every show ever. There are going to be things that people are going to add to a show or whatever that they could have done better, or they could have made more magnificent, or they could have made detract less from something or whatever. But whatever the case, I think it was a pretty good episode. What about you, Dylan?
I think that I really liked the character development that was brought to Winry. The fact that not only are we learning more about her, but she's learning more about herself and changing in the process is really cool. I also like the fact that we're getting to see more of Scar's character and what makes him as a person. I think it's a very fascinating decision that the writers of the show made to include the backstories of both characters in the same episode, to draw direct parallels between both, because who would have thought of that? Like, of course, Scar, one of the most terrifying people in the show, is most like Winry, ? Apparently, and it works. The fact that they can draw that ridiculous comparison and at the end of it have us go, yeah, this is a perfectly valid comparison. Thank you for that, is a really good achievement.
I guess it's valid in the sense that they've both lost people close to them? So I guess that makes it also kind of valid. And their reactions.
I mean, they
And
lost people in the same exact war.
yeah, exactly. Oh, and they also at some point or another wanted vengeance. It's just that Winry.
Winry was the better person.
Yeah.
I also like that this episode puts us steadily closer to the thing that has by now become incredibly obvious, which is that we're moving towards an alliance of convenience now. Because Scar has tried to kill them twice, and he's not the main villain, so either he's going to die, or he's going to become an
join
ally.
the good guys.
And
right? Is that what you were going to say?
yeah, and even Dylan from the past started to recognize this, especially at the end of the next episode. We'll get to that when we get to it, where it's just sort of obvious, like, yeah, Scar is going to be on their side at some point, and I kind of want to see that, because that would be really cool.
Awesome.
Alliances of convenience are always awesome, even if you don't have to be a good writer to pull off an alliance of convenience. These happen to be pretty good writers, so, like, I spent a very long time, just throwing this out there, I spent a long time, more than I would have liked, waiting for this alliance of convenience before it finally maybe happened, question mark? I don't know.
You know, when I heard alliance of convenience, you know what I thought? Father secretly owns Walmart. Get it? Alliance of convenience. Right? Because convenience.
The problem
sucks.
with that is that Father isn't the one forming the alliance. It's between Scar and the Elric brothers. So instead of Walmart, it would be a tea shop.
Tea shop.
Their alliance of convenience is a tea shop.
Tea shop.
And Scar says, yes, I would love sugar, unlike the heathens who prefer coffee. Coffee. He hates coffee so much that he even pronounces it wrong. I can't say the name. Coffee. It's disgusting. Pass me the crumpets.
Okay. That's enough. Goodbye.
I agree. I'll talk to you later, Tim.